Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. It has once again been a week, but a lot of Canadian stories this week that I want to touch about, and they're all kind of connected together. But before we do that, let's take a quick jaunt around the world, as it were, and see some of what else was bothering me this week. So without further ado, welcome to the Sunday Sum Up, and our first stop on this terrifying journey is Reddit. So you know how a lot of assholes on the internet love to say, if you just comply with officers, you have nothing to worry about. Just comply. Just comply. Well, the following image came out of a police protest. Those are cops protesting vaccine mandates, saying, do not comply. Which again is kind of hilarious coming from the people that will literally either, if you're lucky, beat you up if you refuse to comply, or in the worst cases, straight up kill you for refusing to comply. So yeah, that's a good bit of hypocrisy to start the sum up with. I wonder if that's going to be a theme moving forward. The next thing I saw is admittedly something that's been on the internet for a while, but it just really reminded me of how just terrible a concept it is, and how there's no real actual justice in many of our Western countries. So back in the day, an ex-mortgage CEO was sentenced to prison for $3 billion in fraud, but they only received a 40-month sentence. Meanwhile, a homeless man got 15 years in prison for stealing $100. $3 billion in fraud. Okay, well, you gotta go to jail, but really, it's like a little slap on the wrist. Don't you worry there, friend. Homeless man steals a $100 bill. 15 years in jail, you bastard. What's especially damning about the homeless man's story is that he stole $100 from a Louisiana bank, and then he felt remorseful, so he actually turned it over to the police. And then in the wake of that, the judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Like, what the actual fuck, man? I would say that the rich asshole bilking people for $3 billion in fraud is way worse than a remorseful homeless man who steals a crisp $100 bill and then again remorsefully returns it. The punishments should have been reversed. But like I said, there is no real justice in America or Canada or anywhere else for that matter. And on that lovely note, let's go quickly to the next story. So also earlier this week, Politico released a story where they were basically pointing out how, oh look, Kirsten Sinema is collecting money from firms opposed to Democrats' major labor bill. Wow, shocker. It's not like people like me were already talking about this a while ago about how politics is really just openly corrupt, which again is like, okay, so then why can't you people just say that she's being bribed? Just say she's being bribed, you cowards. Oh wait, no, right, it's America, so if you say that, oh no, that's slanderous libel and it opens up to a lawsuit and blah blah blah. And in more news about the rich getting away with just everything, even though they absolutely shouldn't, there was an interesting development in the whole Facebook Meta story. So before, it's already no doubt considered old news, but Facebook got into a lot of trouble when the whistleblower showed up on 60 Minutes and pointed out Facebook knew that what they were doing was wrong, but oh look, it's so profitable, so who cares if society collapses? We're making money from it. And then, almost like clockwork, a few days or a week later, they announced that they were changing the whole, it's not the Facebook company anymore, it's Meta, the Meta company. Well, apparently the actual Meta company is not too happy about that. Meta company for immediate public release. Facebook stole our name and livelihood. Yeah, that's right. Apparently, Facebook legit just stole another company's name and has not compensated them at all. In fact, the story, according to the original Meta company, is in a way hilarious, but also really frustrating. Hello world, we are Meta Company, original flavor. For the last 3 months, Facebook lawyers have been hounding us to sell our name to them. We refused their offer on multiple bases. Namely, the low offer wouldn't cover the costs of changing our name, and we insisted on knowing the client and intent, which they did not want to disclose. So when this company told them no after Facebook just absolutely lowballed them, they said, well, you know what, screw them, we're going to use it anyway, we got money, we'll just, fight it in courts. We can just throw money at that problem until the other side is bankrupt or is forced to settle. That's how justice works in the West now, everyone. So yeah, it's just very clear that laws don't apply to the rich, and that's a problem. Man, it's almost like we need some kind of justice reform or something. And so I guess this brings us to the next story, which is, again, related to justice, specifically how the Democrats seem, again, as part of the neoliberal order that maintains actual power in America and just the West in general, they don't actually care about justice at the end of the day. There's this tweet that I want to bring people's attention to. It's by It's Going Down News, and it says, in areas where the majority of people in the U.S. live, areas controlled by Democrats, tens of millions took part in mass strikes, pipeline battles, and the George Floyd uprising. For the DNC to attack these movements now shows you everything about their strategy for the future. And the strategy is one of intense police brutality to keep people in line, and it's why police budgets keep going up, even though most people agree they should be really reduced. But what really puts it into perspective are these pictures in the tweet that just show not only the militarization of the police, which, this one picture in particular, Jesus Christ, is this in America or in the Congo? Good Lord. The ruling class knows that with a lot of people in cities, those are going to be focal points for protests against climate, racial injustice, natural disasters. So we need the police to be here and to be fully readily equipped, because if someone tries to rob me in my penthouse, what to me is just so surreally disturbing, and I think I have talked about it before on this channel, is that it shows the blurring of lines between the military and the police, where it's getting harder to tell them apart unless it just says police on the front of the armored car, or you see it somewhere, or sheriff's deputy or whatever, or county police, whatever it may be, on a shoulder flash while they wear camo. It's pretty wild and a very distressing sign of what they're preparing for and where they think things are headed. So next up, we have a story from Britain, which, oh boy, things are not fantastic over there. But again, there's this lovely, delicious bit of hypocrisy coming from conservatives across the pond. A lot of conservatives and Brexiteers love to say in the past, you can't overturn a decision just because you don't like it. So guess what they recently did? They overturned a decision because they didn't like it. MPs vote to overturn Owen Paterson's 30-day parliamentary suspension. MPs have voted to overturn a recommended 30-day suspension for Conservative MP Owen Paterson. Paterson was facing the ban after an egregious breach of lobbying rules, said the Parliamentary Standards Committee. Mr. Paterson denies any wrongdoing. Yeah, apparently conservatives in Britain got really upset that they would ever be held to account for, basically, we call it lobbying, but really it's just bribing. Let's be real here. And so this dude was actually quite rightly banned and suspended from Parliament as punishment. Conservative MPs decided, what? No, come on. If they could do that to him, they could do it to any one of us, because we're also just really corrupt. So we're going to vote to overturn this and just go completely mask off for a hot second. Again, the hypocrisy from conservatives is astounding. And then in related news of rich British assholes just being absolutely hypocritical, Prince Charles, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales himself, was at COP26 and saying, we all must do our part to help protect the planet. And it's pretty hilarious for this rich asshole to tell the rest of us that we need to change our behavior when he refuses to do such himself. In under 2 weeks, Prince Charles clocked up via private air travel over 16,000 miles at a cost of 280,000 British pounds, which, with the carbon emissions in total, was over 162 tons in 11 days, which is 18 times an average Britain's yearly total. We all need to change our behavior. Start with yourself, jackass. But hey, it wouldn't be a Sunday sum up without also having a good old chance to talk about Florida.
I know there was recent news, people were asking about school children with vaccine. In Florida, there will be no mandate on school children. That is a decision that parents can make. That is not a decision that the government is going to be allowed to force here in the state of Florida. That's the law we passed earlier this year anyways, but we'll make sure that that's something that everybody is abiding by.
That is good old Florida man Governor Ron DeSantis announcing that Florida schools will no longer require vaccination for polio, measles, and mumps. Oh God, it is exhausting living in the same timeline as Florida. I also find it hilarious that he's saying this is something that the government can't mandate, but you'll actually mandate other things, such as we forbid schools from implementing their own mask policies. Shouldn't that also be up to people? Oh wait, no, sorry, I forgot. You're conservatives and therefore not logically consistent at all. If polio and measles make a comeback in Florida thanks to this asshole, I swear to God. I feel so bad for my Florida family, like honest to God. Anyway, moving on to even more distressing stories, because that's how we roll here on a Sunday. And now, moving north of the border, we finally get to all the terrible Canadian stories that happened this week. November 5th was a doozy, but before we get to that, there was an interesting thing that I saw on November 4th. According to Stephen Pinwasi on Twitter, am I the only one that finds it weird a family moved to Canada, moved $167 million through banks, bought $32 million in property, and only a Swiss bank asked them about it? And when BC figured it out, Canada sealed the deportation file that said they were wanted by Interpol? I'm sorry, but why isn't this a bigger story of national significance? Especially given how ridiculously unaffordable housing prices are in the lower mainland of BC. It's basically all part of a mini thread, so I will link it down below and people can read it at their leisure. But yeah, what the actual hell, Canada? Meanwhile, people continue to suffer and are actually actively persecuted by the government and have their few benefits that they have if they're poor stripped away from them because they made mistakes, and the government is like, listen, we can let things fly with the rich, but we absolutely can't let you have a single free ride, even if you did so accidentally. And so now this brings us to the rest of the terrifying stories from this country. So perhaps people haven't been fully paying attention, but because of a whole bunch of different elections that have happened over the course of the pandemic, we basically have a string of conservative governments from practically coast to coast. BC has an NDP government, which again is... And Newfoundland and Labrador has a liberal government, also But from Nova Scotia to Alberta, it's basically a sea of provincial conservative blue. So that means some stories are gonna come up. And so one of the things that happened was that the conservative government of New Brunswick decided to ban land acknowledgements for Indigenous nations because, conservatives be like that. I see reconciliation is going swimmingly. And then on November 4th, Nova Scotia's new conservative government made a rather large misstep when the new premier said that minimum wage workers don't have real jobs. And then his clarification afterwards was, sorry, I didn't mean to say that they weren't real jobs, but they're not real careers. It's like, listen, dude, if all these jobs are so important to the crucial functioning of this capitalist society that we've all built and that we are forced to participate in every goddamn day, then maybe, you need to pay these workers and not treat them like crap just because they aren't quote unquote careers. If they're still super necessary to the functioning of the system, that's kind of a crucial thing, which means it should be adequately funded and the workers there paid. Especially if, as we've seen over the course of this pandemic, those jobs are well and truly necessary. They're essential, as it were. So yeah, I see Nova Scotia's new conservative government is doing splendidly. So how I've talked before on this channel about housing unaffordability here in Canada and how it's a really big problem and governments aren't doing nearly enough to address it, and they aren't building nearly enough units, they aren't funding them correctly. Well, apparently it gets even worse. Billions of dollars for affordable housing not making it out the door, nonprofit advocates say. Complex process to access federal loans holding up construction for many tenants in need. So in something that would no doubt make conservatives say, aha, see, this is why government bad. And to a certain extent, they have a point here. The process by which to try and access federal funds and loans, and like low interest loans specifically, to build affordable housing in order to keep it affordable, is this very long, convoluted, and roundabout process. One urban planner in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia has literally spent 2 decades trying to get some affordable housing built. So not only are we currently building way too little of it, and we're not funding enough of it in the first place, it's also taking decades to build anything because of the current process that's set up. Again, I'll link the article down below for people to read on their own time, because it goes into more depth about like the actual program in question, why for some people it's not working, just how convoluted it is. Because yeah, wow, this is just the perfect unholy trinity of terribleness that is contributing to the homelessness crisis and the housing affordability crisis in this country. We aren't building and funding enough of it, and then the funds that we set aside for it become nearly impossible to access. What is this world? And I mean, I understand the base sort of operating logic behind it of, oh, well, we can't just let anyone come in and just take the money. That would be really bad. And we're going to come back to this in a hot second, unfortunately. But I understand that the base of, look, it's taxpayer money, so we have to be at least, pretend to be responsible with it. So you got to jump through some hoops in order to access it. On some level, I understand that. But when it comes to something like affordable housing, where things already take time, can't you do like a running process of it? Just kind of let them access the funds, and then, oh, look, if they misappropriated it, guess what? You get to either seize the property or you get to sue them in court. Why tie it up even more when we know there's already a lack of affordable housing? Not enough of it is being built and not enough of it is being funded. And so when you try and provide this opportunity to solve that issue, you are still making it so complicated. Why? But yeah, anyway, remember how I was talking about the whole, oh yeah, we got to be somewhat responsible with public money, and again, hypocrisy of rich versus poor. I know I've covered a while back, I'll see if I can find it, but no guarantees. But I know I've talked before about companies just abusing the emergency wage supplement, which was another one of the pandemic benefits, to basically give themselves like stock buybacks and bonuses rather than keep on staff throughout the pandemic. Well, the government has basically said, shucks, Chrystia Freeland wagged her finger and said, oh, that's very bad of you. We're very upset. Meanwhile, there was another pandemic support for seniors known as the Guaranteed Income Supplement. And now, according to the CBC, almost 90,000 seniors are facing guaranteed income supplement cut for accepting pandemic benefits. Yeah, the kind, caring, and progressive government of Canada of Justin Trudeau has decided, you know what? We gotta claw back this money that seniors took at basically our own telling them, oh, hey, yeah, if you need an income supplement, apply for this. You need pandemic supports. We're going to take care of everyone. Don't you worry. Well, now grandma and grandpa applied for this to help make ends meet over the course of the pandemic. And boy, howdy, now the government really wants their money back. All the other millions taken and abused by big business, totally fine. Grandma and grandpa taking some CERB benefits or this GIS. Whoa, you went way too far, you geriatric bastards. And no, this is not hyperbole. This is unfortunately real fucking life, where seniors and elderly people who applied and successfully got onto the CERB are now having their guaranteed income supplements clawed back, all because, again, the government's like, well, that's too many benefits for you. You know how already OAS is really not enough to cover basic expenses in an increasingly unaffordable world, and your healthcare costs when you get older definitely go up because, you're getting older? And yeah, maybe people remember, maybe they don't, all that talk from the liberals of, look, you know what? No, if you need support, apply for the CERB, don't worry about it later. We just want to help people. We care about helping people. And now that the quote unquote pandemic is over in the eyes of the governments and big business, hey, come on, TikTok, you got to pay us back now. It is so mask off. And again, really obvious in their hypocrisy of letting big business go with like millions, if not billions, in just seized money, seized free taxpayer money, by the way, of the emergency workers or wage subsidy rather, that was intended to help them keep workers. And instead, oh, look, we gave ourselves bonuses and stock buybacks. Yeah, look at us. We're doing great at this capitalism thing. Grandma and grandpa get on the CERB to help make ends meet because their other supplements are not enough. Well, no, that's too bad. We got to be really forceful. Chrystia Freeland wags her finger at abusive big business, and that same government looks at grandma and grandpa and says, pay up. This country is a fucking nightmare. And then finally, in all the terrible Canadian stories, we got to talk about Ontario. Ontario's ghoul of an education minister, Stephen Lecce, recently said something that really rubs me the wrong way. He recently defended a $460 million base education funding cut to schools by saying that spending across government more than makes up for it. In other news, there's a couple highways being proposed that nearly no one wants in the province, and those are getting millions in funding. Huh. Also, it's pretty audacious of Stephen Lecce to say that, oh, well, look, we're spending in other areas, so it more than makes up for it. No, it doesn't, because study after study shows that education is the single best investment you can make that you will see the highest returns on. So in other words, if you spend a ton of money on education, that down the line has fantastic impacts on people and society. You would think the education minister, who's also conservative and loves economics and returns on investment, would know that. But that's not his purpose as education minister. His purpose is to ruin education and try and privatize it and turn people against teachers and teacher unions so that then the whole general amount of educated people is less, so that conservatives can get away with lying far more and hopefully win more elections off of BS reasons. That's the purpose of an education minister in a conservative government. And it's also interesting that in related news, he and other education ministers, and even at the federal level, when they say, look, we're going to give even more money to provinces to try and cover more education, especially in remote communities. And they talk about, oh, well, look, costs are going up. We just need to make cuts. Or, oh, look, we're doing this marginal increase, but it doesn't actually account for cost of living and expenses. So even though it technically looks like an increase, in all reality, it's actually a cut. It's all just so ridiculous, and it's all just, or it feels anyway, like it's really mask off. Like the pandemic just showed them, you know what? No, we just gotta do what we really want to do, which is be absolutely terrible, hypocritical bastards. From the stories in Britain to the stories in America to the numerous ghoulish stories here north of the border, it all shows that there's two different societies, or as they love to say in Quebec, two solitudes. You have the fact that most of us, your average working class person, if you want to call yourself middle class, poor, etc., most of us don't really have a real shot at justice or success in this world. And all the pressures that we keep facing and that conservatives and right-wing grifters love to tell us are the fault of other people. Meanwhile, the people at the very top, the ruling class, the elite, the capitalists, these are the assholes who continue to put out way more emissions to actually overturn results that they don't like, even though they shouldn't be overturned. These are the same assholes who love to talk about, oh, look, see, we're actually more than spending enough money, when they aren't. They just routinely take money from us, the taxpayers, and all they get from the government is a wag of the finger of, oh, you shouldn't have done that, but aren't you just such an adorable scamp? And the rest of us get actively punished. A dude manages to bilk $3 billion worth of money in a fraud case, and he gets only 40 days or months in prison. Meanwhile, a homeless person steals $100, feels guilty about it, returns it, and he gets 15 years in jail. Hey, you want money for social housing? Got to jump through a million different hoops, and even then it'll take decades for everything to happen, if you're lucky. Oh, do billionaires need even more free money and subsidies, especially for the fossil fuel industry? No problem. How's a cool couple billion sound right out the gate? Don't you worry about it. It is so frustrating, and it is just so clear to see. This is not some big conspiracy. Even though I know people love to tie conspiracies into it, it's really not that complicated. This is rich assholes getting away with everything because they fundamentally control the levers of power and government. That is who the government serve. That is who the police protect. The rest of us, we go under the goddamn boot. All these stories show not only the blatant hypocrisy of the rich and also of conservatives in general, it also shows just how fundamentally broken the current system is, where there's no real justice and no real accountability. So we really need to change that, whether that's in the form of some kind of revolution or general strike. Whatever needs to happen, clearly what's happening isn't working, and we just have so much evidence for this. And yet, unfortunately, there's still people defending the indefensible here. It is absolutely wild to me. The wealthy get a free ride with our money, and the rest of us have to suffer for all the other consequences that relate to that. All of us should be anti-capitalist, and yet still we have to have this same circular argument about, well, no, capitalism is actually good. It really isn't. You can so plainly see that here. Conservatives love to bitch and moan about people getting a free ride. Well, then you know what? Turn your attention on the rich. And the fact that many of you won't and you openly support this crap is definitely what's bothering me today.